Again, I welcome you to this event this evening. My name is Professor Fisher, and for those of you who don't know me, I'm faculty in both history and African American studies. And again, welcome. Now, before we begin, I'd like to thank all of our co-sponsors for this event. The School of Humanities and Social Sciences, Women and Gender Studies, the History Department, the Alan Dawley Center for the Study of Social Justice, Political Science, Philosophy, Religion and Classical Studies, English, and the Cultural and Intellectual Community Program Council. TCNJ is really fortunate to have such a congenial and supportive community, especially when we explore matters of great difficulty such as race and social justice. Now with that, I should say how delighted I am to have Dr. Khalil Muhammad on campus this evening. I've known Dr. Muhammad for over 15 years. And I followed his development as a scholar with great interest since he completed his doctorate in 2004 and then accepted the directorship of the Schomburg Center for the Study of African American Culture, or Black Culture, in 2010. Between his graduate work at Rutgers and his current position at Schomburg, Dr. Muhammad has held an Andrew Mellon postdoctoral fellowship in New York at the Vera Institute for Justice, which is actually a community-based organization. He's taken a position on the faculty at the University of Indiana at Bloomington and published an award-winning book with Harvard University Press. Since the publication of his book in 2011, his book is The Condemnation of Blackness, and we should be selling that at the end of this program, Dr. Muhammad has been a regular contributor, at least to me it seems, to the New York Times, the Washington Post, National Public Radio, MSNBC, and C-SPAN. Dr. Muhammad's insights about the social construction of race and the invention of crime as a field of scientific study have offered pertinent and useful background to the debates about stand your ground and other racialized discussions of crime. It is a privilege to have Dr. Muhammad elaborate on his work and provide additional insights on these pressing topics. So with that, and without further delay, I would like to invite Dr. Muhammad.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I think I've met about half of the room. The first time ever, I must say. I've been to a few campuses in my time as a faculty member, and certainly in my time at the Schomburg Center. Can you all hear me correctly? Or, well, can you hear me in the back? Yes? Okay. And I've never had a reception quite like this, so I want to say to the College of New Jersey, to the faculty, to the administrators, you have a really warm and welcoming campus. And it's a terrific spirit and a great vibe, and it's exceptional. So thank you for welcoming me to your campus. I certainly want to thank Chris in particular, who's been a friend for a long time. I joked with him as we came over from the train station that he grew up before I did. He was, he was living in sin, as they say, when I was a 22-year-old graduate student. And he welcomed me to Rutgers University, and the furthest thing I could think of at the time was settling down, and very much interested in my work. But whenever I go to his place, he'd invite me over for a meal, and then just say, "Wow, this is how grown people live." So, it's great to see him here. It's great to see him in a place that has supported his career, and so by extension, I want to thank all of you for supporting him. It means a lot to me personally. I want to, of course, thank all the other administrators and faculty who come out. I want to give a shout out to Anna Nicolosi, my former graduate student peer. We were both at Rutgers, although she was a little bit more advanced than I was. I won't tell you how much.
That's okay, you surpassed me.
No, I mean in terms of being through the program. But for those of you going on to careers in the humanities or graduate school, you make these kinds of friends. I think you have great role models in your faculty, and it's always important to pause and to reflect on that, because what we do here is not just about the work that we convey, about the findings that we deliver, or the lectures that we present. It is about the careers that we lead, and all of you are aspiring to do something with your lives, so I hope that we model that well. Let me cut to the chase then. I want to open tonight's lecture with a quote that I recorded on Meet the Press just a few months ago in the way, can you hear me? I feel like you can't hear me. Or is this audio is just so great that I make it a little bit closer? A little bit closer?
A little louder.
Louder. Okay. Louder. How's that? I probably need to turn this up because I am talking fairly loud. It's a cross between speaking, projecting manually. All right. Tech guy here? No? No?
Oh, man.
All right. We'll be okay. We'll be all right. So I want to share with you the, first of all, tech crisis here. There's the mouse. Hold on, I got it. All right. All right. I want to share with you a quote from the commissioner of the NYPD responding to the Floyd decision. And since we're in New Jersey, I realize many of you are in the New York market, or maybe the Philly market. Which market are you in? Philly. Philadelphia, okay.
Or both.
So I'll give a little bit of background, but I won't spend too much of my time. Essentially, New York City Stop and Frisk program, which really began in 1964 under Governor Rockefeller. I won't give that lecture, but it's been around for a long time. But it kicked into high gear about 12 years ago. And what started with about 99,000 stops reached a high water mark in 2011 of 685 stops. About 87% of those stopped are Black and Latino. About 90% of those stops are never processed for any allegation of a violation of any kind whatsoever. And then those who are essentially arrested or processed, only about 0.1% of them end up being guilty of contraband, either in the form of guns or drugs. So essentially you have a massive system of surveillance that shows very little evidence of wrongdoing amongst those who are purportedly targeted for criminal activity. And so the federal courts decided in a case called Floyd versus New York that elements of stop and frisk are unconstitutional, and has proposed a series of remedial solutions to change it. But part of the story here is not just this contemporary moment for asking the question whether we should trade on our civil rights in exchange for public safety, which is a kind of question that seems to offer no alternatives. It seems to be a question that we can only answer with more or less punishment, more or less surveillance. But that isn't actually the case. And out of a history lesson that I'm going to give, to suggest then that there were times where we made different choices in the interest of either public safety or, let's say, economic security. So that's the framework for you hearing this. But I want to give you a sense of the set of ideas that justify stop and frisk. And what kinds of evidence, so I've met lots of social science majors either in the social department or the criminology department. I've heard political sciences here. So we live in a society that values certain kinds of evidence over other kinds of evidence. Generally speaking, quantitative evidence or empirical evidence is more valuable, more quote-unquote scientific than is anecdotal, humanistic evidence, narrative evidence, ethnographic. Essentially what we see, hear with our eyes and ears, what we write, our personal experiences are less authoritative in governing the kinds of policies that we live under, the kinds of governmental decisions so on and so forth. So I want you to hear how the commissioner of the New York Police Department, who may not be the commissioner in a couple of months, is calling for an appeal of the federal decision that says stop and frisk cannot continue as it does. So New York City lost the case. The commissioner is defending it and saying we're going to appeal. Here's Ray Kelly. And it's about a minute long.
If you look at the statute, it says reasonable suspicion that individuals may be about to commit, are committing, or have committed a crime. One of the classic examples that we use is somebody going down the street trying door handles, or a group of young men that the bodega owner fears going to strong-arm rob them when they leave their store. So there's a preventive aspect to this, and people say innocent. That's not the appropriate word. Well, what you use here is a standard of reasonable suspicion. If you have probable cause, then you have enough to effect an arrest or issue a summons. This, by the way, is a standard law enforcement practice throughout America. It's certainly not just going forward in New York. And as far as your second set of numbers are concerned, we think the reasonable criteria is a criteria that was developed or presented to us by the RAND Corporation, an institution that's been in existence for 100 years, that says that to take a look at racial profiling and determine if it happens, you should first look at the universe of people who are identified by the victims of a crime, the perpetrators identified by the victims of a violent crime. What does that universe look like? And in New York, that universe certainly comports to the racial makeup of the people who are being stopped.
Well, let me just understand what you're saying. Basically, there are more African Americans and Hispanics who are committing crimes in New York City, therefore it justifies a higher percentage of those being stopped on the suspicion that they might do something wrong, that they might commit a criminal act. Because the judge says that's faulty reasoning. She's saying you can't take an innocent population and say that that's the same as a criminal population.
Well, obviously, we don't agree with the judge, and that's why we think an appeal.
There you have it. We don't agree with the judge. So, keyword, RAND Corporation. So when Ray Kelly is responding to the challenge, which is essentially how can you take a population of people who are presumptively innocent in the United States, based on constitutional rights, innocent until proven guilty, and say that because some population within that group that happens to share the same racial identity as that group should be subject to disproportionate scrutiny by the police department. And his response, the RAND Corporation that's been around for 100 years, says that that's okay. Now, for those who don't know the RAND Corporation, it is one of the most authoritative social scientific research laboratories in the nation. Its job is to produce scientific research to help decision makers, from government leaders to politicians to private corporations, make smart decisions about how to do whatever it is they want to do in society. So that citing of social scientific authority is itself a historical development. It wasn't always the case that we could make certain truth claims about what we should do in our society versus what we shouldn't do by posturing or citing social science. Let's put a bookmark in that. We're going to finish where we started, okay? Which is our contemporary moment with this question of where did social science, or I should say, when did social science become the basis for making certain kinds of truth claims about how we should punish people in America? Hence the condemnation of blackness. So the race problem grows out of the process of making real freedom in the wake of the Civil War. So what we call the race problem in the late 19th and 20th century is a direct consequence of the end of the Civil War. So this is our starting point. It's also our starting point because you essentially cannot have a criminalized population of African Americans